Welcome into another episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, the real underscore G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, no longer TikTok because I just got banned. Don't really know how the heck that happened, but guess it wasn't meant to be. Maybe I've said something negative about China and didn't even realize it. I'm not sure. But anyway, we're here. We're past the end of the regular season or the season in general for the club soccer in Europe, but there is an international window before the sunbeds and the Ibiza trips are really underway, though Jack Grealish, I think, is still in his Champions League uniform. And I heard had to get wheelchaired out of a hotel in Ibiza. So in Ibiza, if I'm going to really pronounce it right, it'd be really nice. I wish I was there instead of here in beautiful Dallas, Texas on June 13th, late night with the real underscore G Warner. As always, if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. That would be awesome. And, we're going to do this as always, but really focus specifically in this episode on the Nations League, as there are two matches, semifinals to be played, that then we'll have a championship matchup and a third place matchup actually this weekend. Expecting that I will be doing a weekend soccer podcast because there's a lot of UEFA Euro 2024 qualifiers going on, which are very interesting to me, both from an interest or entertainment value, but also for a gambling perspective, because unlike most international friendlies, those actually matter, and people are playing for the Euro just like they're playing for the World Cup. So that should be good. So stay tuned for that one. I'll give a pregame.com promo code there on that episode because it should be a longer one, as I only have two matches to go through. But I do have rosters in front of me. I'm going to go through kind of the strategy and really what's been going on with these national teams because there's a lot to talk about, I think. And it's, of course, late night. Baseball schedule is about to wrap up, but I figured I might as well. So I guess record this and see how much interest we get, because that might give me an idea of what we're going to look at this weekend. Want to first also, before I get into this, mention my Patreon. All patrons are getting access to all my baseball plays, all the soccer stuff that's coming out. I'm going to start going through my futures as well, and trying to get some early indications or thoughts on that, and really to get an idea of where the baseline begins and where all these numbers move. I had a pretty good futures year last season, in clubs futures is what we're talking about here. Too far away from Germany 2024 for the Euro there, but in the World Cup whenever it's coming after that in 2026. But I want to keep it going. I had a 1-1 in the futures, but I take plus money. So I think I was a little bit profitable on a Stade Rennais in France, finishing in a European position. That was the winner this year. The loser was Villarreal in Spain, finishing in a Champions League position. Unfortunately, they were one spot away, but feel pretty good about those calls. It was very close, really, until the last couple match days for both of them. And Rennes, with a really nice close of the season, did the trick, just like the season before that. Monaco, the incredible run in Ligue 1 to finish in a Champions League position, which is what I had bet the year before. So that was great. I'm going to try to do that again next year. So stay tuned. That's going to be kind of a lot of the off-season content. I'm going to do it. Probably each episode is focusing on one league specifically. Been tracking transfers and trying to make sure that I'm on top of all that, but really want to look deeper into relegation and things of that nature before we get into it. But as always, all lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account and use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So now that we've added some money into your pocketbooks, let's start. And I guess we'll jump right into the Wednesday match. The tournament semifinals of the Nations League and the rest of it really are all being held in the Netherlands, in Holland, in Europe. These are all, I think, winners of their individual A leagues or A groups of Nation League. And essentially this is semifinals. They advance to this point, and then they get through. Winners take on each other in the Sunday final. and the losers play a third place matchup, which I guess would be worth it to get a trophy. Or I guess you're getting a medal if you finish with a bronze medal. It's certainly not as important as Croatia's third place finish in the World Cup, but people like putting trophies on resumes and talking about that for years and years to come. So we'll see what comes of all that. And I guess we'll start with this one. This is Netherlands hosting Croatia. This is in, I believe, PSV's Eindhoven Stadium, if I'm not mistaken. I was really impressed by the Dutch crowds in all of the European club events, like in the Champions League, Europa League, Europa Conference League. I'd expect people to care about this one and that there to be a lot on the line here. And this first matchup does feature the Dutch at home. They're hosting Croatia. And I'll get into more about this after I guess I get the line out there. Currently, the Netherlands are a half a goal favorite at home. Over under is 2.25. Juice to the over slightly, a little bit. In terms of where this number has gone, Croatia started as a half a goal favorite when I started tracking it. But the juice is a little bit heavier. It's fallen a little bit. So that tells me a little money has come in on the Netherlands. The over-under has pretty much done not much movement, to say the least. And I would expect just in international play and general international windows, these players aren't playing together all the time, which I do think really limits the offensive capacity of a lot of these sides. So it kind of makes sense that the total is down to 2.25. And I'll get into a little bit more of what I expect and how this game to go. But that's really the international windows. I think other than maybe the Champions League, Europa League, Europa Conference League, I think international windows are most my bread and butter, probably the best to me. Had a really good World Cup and I'm going to try to continue with that here. So wanted to discuss, I think Croatia is a little bit more interesting to discuss because they're on the road and they're dealing with a lot of injuries. Joseph Guardiola, they're basically the best defender that they have, was not ruled fit enough to play or to really even join the team in this squad, and was replaced by a forward in Belgio from Football Club Augsburg in Germany. Guardiola, who also plays for Leipzig, at least for now. We'll see. They're asking for a lot of money for him. I wouldn't be shocked if he moved to a really highly compensated or team with a lot of money is probably going to buy him maybe this summer, if not this summer, next summer. I hope he stays for Leipzig's sake of potentially challenging for a Meisterschalle, but he was really good in the World Cup, was pretty young entering that tournament, but really got a lot of respect, a lot of fanfare coming in, and then really, I think, delivered on that and was really impressive to me. But he's not there, and unfortunately, that really puts the Croatian defense into a little bit of an issue. I mean, they have Domagoj Vida, who we saw in the World Cup from 2014, I want to say. So, like, he's been around forever. I think he's my age, 33, 34 years old, something like that. And looks like is like the only center back that I can really believe in on the Croatian side, which is going to be problematic because the Netherlands are going to really put them under pressure, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So that's my biggest concern right now. Croatia have such a good midfield, and honestly, they have better wingbacks, I think, or fullbacks than a lot of people would expect. Borna Sosa had kind of a so-so year in Stuttgart, but ultimately his left foot isn't dynamic, crossing the ball into the box. Stanisic, who was a Meisterschalle winner with with Bayern Munich, should have been Borussia Dortmund, but didn't work out, as a lot of people know. I think that Sutalo is probably going to play in center back position, I guess, alongside Vida, but he wasn't really someone that Croatia wanted to use in the World Cup. And I feel like there's a lot of possibilities on what this back four is going to look like. And honestly, not following the Croatian team as closely, it's going to make it pretty hard for me to call who's going to be there. I would have said that Vardiol is going to be the number one, and he's the guy that needs to be there. But of course, within his injury, that's going to be a problem as well. I don't really know what they're going to do. I mean, I think there's a good chance that they try their best to do a makeshift back line and probably play three fullbacks in some sort of combination with one of those playing in the center back position next to Vida, but also Vida might not start because he's not very young. And I mean, there's so many ways that this could go. I'm very interested in seeing what this Zlatko lineup looks like when it actually comes out. Behind the defensive back line, Dominik Livakovic should be starting here. He's about as trustworthy as they come. And I think will be really helpful, but will ultimately be someone that needs to be leaned upon in the back. Certainly a stabilizing force, but also very concerning to me because you never really want the goalkeeper to be someone you're trusting the most in the back line because fortunately there's only so much of an impact he can have. Certainly he could stand on his head, hockey reference, I guess, or make a lot of saves, but you really don't want that from a goalkeeper because unfortunately the more chances they have, the more chances they're going to really make a big mistake. And unfortunately, even great goalkeepers like Thibaut Courtois, they're not immune from big mistakes. In the midfield, Croatia, that's where they're best. That's where they've been best for a really long time. Luka Modric is in this side. There's certainly speculation he was going to be retiring from all football, but especially international, because I feel like that's the first to go. But re-signed with Real Madrid, it sounds like, and so it is available and is playing in this competition. Kovacic, Brozovic, who just came off the Champions League final, but it was a loser, so I've clearly far less partying and celebrating than the Man City side, to say the least. Plenty of other great midfielders as well behind them. Brozovic might not start in this semifinal. That wouldn't be so shocking to me, which I do think will take out a very important player if he doesn't start. I'd want him in there for every minute that he could be available. A center defensive midfielder is going to be important, especially on the road in the Netherlands. As for strikers, and this is the biggest question for me, it would have been the biggest question until hearing about the defensive lineup for Croatia, but ultimately, goal scoring was a big problem for Croatia. It's amazing that they got into and took third place in the World Cup. Amazing just based on the size of their country, but especially because of how much they struggle scoring goals. Perisic is there, listed as a forward. I don't know if that's really ever believable, considering he played left wing back for Tottenham this whole season. Incredible creator. I actually watched this Croatian national team in Austria in September, I want to say late September. And it was really just the Perisic and Modric show, which I'm so happy I went. And it was kind of a weird event, but I love weird, so that was sweet. Andre Kramaric really had a poor season for Hoffenheim. He's probably the biggest name to know. Bruno Pekovic, I think, is someone that's been around, but really hasn't done anything with his opportunities, so isn't someone I'd want to trust. Peter Musha, who's I think was at Benfica, and then Bellio, who just got called up from Football Club Augsburg, and then plenty of players in the background that might come up, which I guess that might be where the central defenders might come from, with Shaleta Sar and also Uremovic, but those are really not great players. Plus Brekalo and Orsic potentially coming into the team as well, as I guess they named more than were guaranteed to make the squad just based on injuries and things of that nature. So Croatia, the strongest in the midfield as always. Their defense is a real question for me, but I think honestly their strikers or their forwards are even more problematic or questionable. If I'm Croatia trying to get the best players on the pitch and I'm like managing playing FIFA video game or something like that, I'm probably stacking as many midfielders as possible. I don't know necessarily that's as useful or likely. I mean, 3-5-2, 3-5-1-1, maybe, with as many midfielders as you can get out there, try to control possession as much as possible. Probably is the way to do it, because I do think that there's a lot to be concerned about, especially on the road in the Netherlands, playing in Holland essentially, and against a side that's been really aggressive. And so I guess I'll close the Croatia side of this by saying that they're going to try to control the ball, control the midfield, and do their best to really cause, or I think to hide their defensive frailties based on injuries and really not being too deep at the center back position anyway. On the other side, the Netherlands, Ronald Koeman's still their manager. He was really good as a manager for the Dutch, or maybe he's coming in and taking over, I guess, now, as opposed to still being there. But was a good manager. It was doing really well until the Barcelona job that he coveted for a long time, and he then moved there. I think management was a problem in the World Cup for the Dutch. Might have really stopped them from going as far as they did. They controlled the United States. That wasn't saying much, in my humble opinion. But ultimately, they're a side that wants to play on the front foot. That's how they played under Coleman and how they played under Van Gaal, I believe, who filled in for, or I took the job for the 10th time or whatever. But ultimately wasn't really that successful or someone that they wanted there, I don't think. But they're going to play on the front foot, especially at home. They're going to be very aggressive. They're a really strong team. They have great attackers, and I feel like they're going to really boss a lot of this game. At least if they want to do. I think goalkeeping is still a question for the Dutch. Mark Flecken, this Sportical Freiburg goalkeeper, who's likely on the move, I think, to Brentford this summer. Who knows what he's focused on? But he was a surprise leave off the club or the roster that went to the World Cup. Andres Noput from a really unknown side, Herenveen, I think played most, if not all, the minutes in the World Cup, and is named in this squad as well. I would expect that he might be there. Could be Bila from Feyenoord. I'm not really sure the goalkeeper position. I feel like that's probably the weakest area for the Dutch. But I don't know how much the Croatian side are really going to even in their best like pick of how they'd want to play, which is controlling the ball. I don't know that leads to a lot peppering of shots on goal. And really, I think it's going to be tough for them to test the goalkeepers more than the few times you'd expect in regular matchups. So this might be a spot or position that the Dutch could hide, but I think it's going to be based on their defense, how they do that. So Nathan Ake, who's finally back fit, Sven Botman, who had a really good season at Newcastle, and honestly is a really, really big threat on goal scoring as well from corner kicks. Didn't really do a lot of that for Newcastle this year, but they have a lot of people in that type of position or that type of role. De Ligt played pretty well for Bayern Munich after really looking like a kind of a lost player in general. Dumfries coming off Inter's loss in the Champions League. We'll see if he starts. He's probably a big question mark. Malacia, who has played really well for the Dutch, didn't really have a great Manchester United debut season, but and then of course Virgil van Dijk in the middle will probably be playing for the Dutch side forever, it feels like. So a lot of great defenders there, a lot of depth. They can handle injuries, they can substitute, and that puts them in a pretty good position to really squeeze a very limited Croatian front line. Certainly you got to worry about their midfielders, but I feel like the Dutch side will probably welcome Luka Modric from distance as opposed to trying to find a way or Croatia trying to find a way into their box. In the midfield, more strength here. Frenkie de Jong, who didn't have a great year for Barcelona, but won the title in La Liga, and honestly is one of the best players internationally. Plays a lot more offensively, I think, for Barcelona and that, or for the Dutch than Barcelona, and that'll help. The Atalanta combo of Dorun and Koopmeiners. Koopmeiners, I thought, had a great end of the season in Serie A. Noah Long, who's Lang Long, however you pronounce it, came out of nowhere and had a really good season with Club Bruges, and their shock move to the knockout rounds in the Champions League. And that's kind of where the name gets a little bit less well known. Wijnaldum, who plays so far up the pitch compared to what he did for Liverpool, and really he didn't play much for Roma either, but plays really well for this national team. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me how many goals this national team can get. And I do think that limits my interest in Croatia, especially with defensive problems. But I'll finish the forward position. Depay, who didn't really play much for Atleti towards the end of the season, but Gakpo was playing a lot for Liverpool, was a big signing. Daniel Malen, who's had an awesome close to the year for Borussia Dortmund as well. Wout Weghorst, who's really, I think, going to come off the bench and be a potential tall player. And I mean, after what he did to pull out of the fire an incredible I think draw with 2 goals late in the World Cup was awesome. I'm gonna love that guy forever, and really I enjoyed him in the Bundesliga until he kind of fell out of favor with Wolfsburg and tried to get a move to England, where he ended up finishing. And then Steven Bergwijn, who's always on the list and on this side, but I'm not really sure what to expect from him, the new Ajax player, at least after such a long spell at Tottenham. So just to summarize, the team that wants the ball, they're going to be front-footed. They're going to be racing, using their pace. Defense is so strong. As for midfield, same. The forward's probably the weaker of the spots here, besides goalkeeper, which I think is the by far the weakest area. So 2 sides, but ultimately Netherlands at home, I think they're going to be on the front foot. Croatia are going to try to steal the ball and keep it away from Netherlands as much as they can. But they're going to have to use a lot of their old legs, their limited depth. And I think it's going to be problematic, especially with Brozovic potentially not starting this match. And I think that will impact the Croatia midfield, potentially forcing like a Lovro Majer or something like that into the starting lineup, which is a lot more of an offensive player, which I think will then make Croatia's defense even more of a concern potentially for Zlatko Dalic. And then I think what that'll end up doing is forcing Croatia's hand to be a lot more conservative with how they play. I think my biggest interest, when I go back to the spread here, Croatia half a goal underdog with a little with more of the juice right now, coming down. And I think I wouldn't be shocked to see the Netherlands catch more money as this gets closer to the kickoff tomorrow on Wednesday, June 14th. As for over under, I think my strongest lean in this matchup is to under 2.25. The Netherlands are going to want to blow this thing open and score as many goals as possible, especially at home. And I think knowing that Croatia have limitations in the forward position and to try to exploit the Croatian defense, I think Croatia are going to play the other way and then try to make this as low scoring as possible. I feel like this is Croatia is the Inter and the Netherlands are the Manchester City of the Champions League final that a lot of you probably watch this weekend, this past weekend. I feel like I'd love to see this climb, especially where the juice is more on the over side right now, that potentially that might climb to 2.5 before it kicks off. To me, that's not a huge difference between 2.25 and 2.5 because there's no real push ability there. Certainly be nice to win a full unit on a game that ends 1-0, 1-1, excuse me, on a game that ends with 2 goals scored, rather than only winning half on the under 2.25 versus 2.5. But ultimately, beggars can't be choosers at this point. I'm looking for wins, especially as we close up the season. And I feel like that's generally my strategy in the sport as well. So that'll be my, I guess, the ultimate best bet portion. I'll do that as always, end of show. I am most interested, I think, in that Croatia under 2.25. I feel like Croatia's defense does worry me a lot back in the side, which it does impact also my interest in the under as well. But that's what we got for now. And so I think we're like 15 minutes in already on just one match. So we're going in depth in this one. I'll now move to the Spanish side, which I think is very interesting, especially because Luis Enrique is not there anymore. This is a Thursday afternoon match here in Dallas, Texas, nighttime in Europe or in Holland where this is being played. Spain currently a quarter goal favorite to Italy, who will be their opponent. Fresh off of not playing the World Cup, Spain with the disappointing World Cup ended up getting their manager sacked, which Luis Enrique just hadn't really done very well for a long time. But there's a lot to talk about here. I'll get to the total now as well. Over unders 2.25 as well. And this one, no home team in this matchup, so that does impact, I think, a little bit the expectation of what this will look like on a neutral. I feel like those matches are always much more lower scoring than on home soil for club teams or international sides. But I think international games generally play more tighter to I think generally because defenses in these games, every country has good enough defenders, whereas sometimes the clubs are lacking in that department. The over-under is 2.25, very heavily juiced the under. I'll go and I guess give a summary of where the lines have moved. So initially, it's always been Italy getting a quarter of a goal, and this is in another stadium in Holland for this matchup. But the Italians were always getting a quarter of a goal. Juice has kind of been moving around in a pretty tight range, but the over-under, it's climbed from over under 2 with all the juice on the over to now being under 2.25 with all the juice on the under. I don't know exactly where this number is going to finish. I think at 2, I'm much more. My interest level is much lower if this closes 2 again. So I do feel like if I want to play under, and if you want to play under, as I go on like every late night episode, if you do want to play under, I think you want to make sure you don't lose the 2.25, because I think the push on 2 versus winning half of a unit, I'd want to take the chance that you grab 2.25 before you lose it, as opposed to waiting to get a better juice. So to speak about Spain, so new manager came in. He is, what the heck is his name? It is, I don't have it committed to memory, so my bad. But it is Luis de la Fuente, who has come in, oversaw a big win over Norway in, I think this was the Euro qualifying, but ultimately a loss to Scotland, which is embarrassing, especially because Scotland is horrible, a much smaller nation, so they aren't expected to be that good, but they haven't been able to score goals in a very long time. But not a great start for a Spanish manager to come in the national team and have a really poor international window. Also gets some speculation that if they don't win this tournament, that he will be sacked. I mean, that's a lot of pressure, especially for some new guy coming in. But ultimately, Spain has really high expectations. They haven't delivered on those for a really long time, since 2012. They haven't won a trophy, and they haven't really deserved it because they haven't been able to score goals at all. I don't really know if that's going to change much here. I think I'll get to the Italian strategy in a little bit, but we had some interesting moves here with the Selección, as they call it, or the national team and the makeup right now. Unai Simon, who I guess was coached in the past by De La Fuente, so he must have some Athletic Club Bilbao background or Basque Country type of situation, which is always problematic for the Catalans versus the kind of mainland Spain, the Catalans, and then or the Catalans I just said versus the Castillas or the whatever it's called, and the I guess the what we know is the Spanish flag and what they play under versus the Catalan flag and versus the Basques as well. So there might be some infighting. There always seems to be in Spain. But anyway, Unai Simon has been the goalkeeper for Spain for a while. I expect him to be in there as well over Kepa and David Raya. That's not a really secure position, in my opinion. I feel like they've had problems there. Unai Simon lost his job this year at Athletic Club to a relative unknown younger keeper. Didn't really do a great job of taking it back, and then got benched again when he finally did win it back. So not a lot of respect, in my humble opinion, for that position grouping. As for defenders, we have Carvajal, who's ancient for Real Madrid, Jesus Navas, who's 37 years old, so somehow more ancient than Carvajal. Laporte's coming, who was formerly playing for the French side, but I think saw a clearer way to playing time with Spain and kind of defected, but hasn't been playing for a long time. David Garcia, who played for Osasuna, had a really great year, but ultimately isn't at the level and really hasn't played a lot at this international level. Probably deserve it based on how he's played. And certainly when I name these other defenders, I mean, there's not a lot of good options on this side. Lenormand, who's just also done the followed Laporte track record and figured he wasn't getting in the French side, so has defected or became and started playing for his Basque, I guess, background and his eligibility in Spain, the Real Sociedad player. Jordi Alba, another ancient player as well, who's moving on for Barcelona. And Juan Bernat, who I think has just pulled out PSG player. So, like, what are we doing with this defense right now? Goalkeepers look bad. Defenders look worse. That's not a great start. And in midfield, we have Rodrigo, who just came off the goal-scoring champion goal for Manchester City in the Champions League. I mean, is he really going to factor into this? I'm not sure. Played center back a lot in the World Cup, and I think for good reason, because when I listed what I just did, I mean, who else do they have to play there? Zubamendi from Real Sociedad, not really that trustworthy. Fabian from PSG, Fabian Ruiz, more of a attacking player, I think, for Napoli than anything, and PSG played sparingly. Mikel Merino is a good player as well for Real Sociedad. Gavi, as we go super young with like an 18-year-old, and then Sergio Canales from Real Betis. So the midfielders, not a lot of creativity there. I think you use Rodrigo's defensing potentially as a center back. Is he going to start coming off of a Champions League celebration? I don't know about that for a match 4 days later and on a Thursday. Like, that seems crazy. As opposed to, I mean, I don't really know what's going to happen there. There's a lot of drama and politics involved here, but this looks really hard for De La Fuente, I got to say. Gavi is going to be in there to take yellow cards, of course, and bust things up. But I mean, sheesh, that's tough. As for forwards, like the most limited position that Spain have, they haven't been able to score goals in years. I mean, supposedly De La Fuente wants to play a strategy similar to Luis Enrique, but it hasn't worked for a long time to possess the ball. I mean, there's a lot of problems, I think, here. We have Morata, who scored very well and I think deserves a little more than credit than I was just saying, and kind of shouldn't speaking as negatively, because he's done really well despite the incredible disrespect he's gotten from his countrymen. Joselu, who's potentially on the move to Real Madrid, but just got relegated with Espanyol. Rodrigo Moreno, who the heck is that's either a young player or is that someone I'm not thinking of? I mean, potentially this list is not going great for me, but Rodrigo from Leeds. Okay, so he's more of I guess a staple to the side. Not used to seeing that Moreno spelled out. Marcos Asensio from Real Madrid. Nico Williams, who's never been able to finish anything for Athletic Club, and I mean, got pulled into the Spanish national team to try to keep him away from Ghana, where his older brother Iñaki plays. Dani Olmo, who seems to be an injury doubt, and Yeremy Pino, who really didn't have a great year for Villarreal. He's a good winger, has a lot of pace, but is still pretty young and very inconsistent, in my humble opinion. Yeah, I don't know. They might possess the ball a lot, Spain, but what are they going to create with it? Nothing, in my humble opinion. And I think their defense is going to be under a lot of pressure, and they might wilt under that pressure. Now we move to Italy, who I mean are even potentially more over the place, just with Mancini still around, so that's good, I guess, for that stability. But not playing the World Cup, haven't played meaningful matches in a long time. Might take them a little bit longer to play together, but they are the underdog here, getting a quarter of a goal. Let me not forget. Goalkeeping, I would expect Donnarumma, PSG stud, to start there. Probably has the grip on that starting position for a long time. Defenders, we have Acerbi from Inter, Darmian from Inter, Bastoni from Inter, DeMarco from Inter. I mean, so many Inter defenders. I'm not really sure what they're going to look like in availability. Probably more so this weekend than for a Thursday match. But even off the bench, still important. Bonucci somehow still in the squad at his age. Di Lorenzo, who's probably going to play in the wing or the fullback, I guess, position. Toloi can play in the middle for Atalanta from Atalanta. Spinazzola, who was so good, it might be the reason why Italy didn't qualify for the World Cup, but he's coming back. Should be available for this one on one side, Di Lorenzo on the other side, and we'll see what type of Inter combination goes in the middle. I mean, yes, these defenders are not great, especially with Inter coming off the disappointment of the Champions League, and it might be hard for them to play, especially, but they only went 90 minutes. They didn't party and celebrate. They probably went straight to the Netherlands after their Saturday evening loss. I mean, this is a Thursday matchup. It's not something they haven't been doing all season. Certainly end of year, hard to say what expectations are out there, but I think Italy is probably more motivated than Spain, especially because they didn't make the World Cup and they've got a lot to kind of undo and to try to build some more confidence in their nation. Also have the best national anthem in sport, so that's going to be something that I'm super pumped for, no matter how this match goes. In the midfield, Barella from Inter. Let's see, no other Inter players on this squad, but Brian Cristante from Roma is more defensive player. Fratesi, who's a great creator, young though. Jorginho, who's more of a bust things up. Not really sure you want to play him too much. Pellegrini is so important to Roma. Marco Verratti coming in to really stop and bust up things, as Gavi will do on the other side for Spain. And then Nicolo Zaniolo did make this team, who's been cast off, kind of sent away Napoleon style to Galatasaray and Turkey. But ultimately, Zaniolo is a huge body with a lot of potential, who should be on one of these sides if he didn't just overplay his hand, I think, probably more so his agent. As for strikers, Chiesa, who didn't really have a great year, didn't play a lot, was injured and still recovering. Nonto from Leeds, who's probably going to move somewhere else. Ciro Immobile didn't have a great year due to injury as well. Raspadori, and then some guy, Retegui, who I don't know. But the Italians don't have a ton in their striking position either, put it that way. But like, I mean, two mirror images of each other ultimately. Spain with, though, to me, a lot more problems in defense that aren't really made up for in their midfield or striker position. Neither of these sides really have great strikers. Probably not a lot of great strikers really in world football at this point in general. But man, the more I think about this, the more I'm watching Italy as closely as possible. I don't want to lose the quarter of a goal that I'm getting it currently at Bet Online. I feel like also Spain is a favorite. I really like going against favorite teams that I don't think are going to have an easy time scoring and playing in their unders. A lot of room in an international event to see an under 2.25 come through, especially because there's not really a lot, to me, of respect that I have for either of these offenses or teams, managers, a lot of things. So, I mean, maybe Spain get this road goal and win 1-0, but that's still great for an under 2.25. So, I guess it's now time for the ultimate best bet portion of the show. You guys are all hanging out for it. You probably have an idea if you've been listening to these podcasts, or if you're on YouTube and you're subscribing, please. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave a 5-star review. That'd be great. Get me up the search bar, get more people listening, potentially more subscribers, more listeners, and then potentially I do more of these each week. Probably, I mean, I'd like to do something before the next day's card. So like something on Thursday for Friday, Friday for Saturday, Saturday for Sunday, or something like that coming next season. But I do want to make sure I have enough listeners for that. So tell your friends and sign up, and that would be very useful for me and potentially leaving my job so I can do this full time. We'll see. So we're a long way away from that. But Also have to mention my Patreon. I'll give a pregame.com promo code for the weekend episode, but on Patreon, highly recommend if you are interested in trying to get my leans every day. I put them out before I go to sleep each night. Try to get something out there in your hands so that you have something actionable to do each day, and then I'll update you throughout the day on what I'm doing, what I'm locking in, when I grab a price. Because a lot about this betting game is playing the stock market and grabbing the right price at the right time. Make sure you get the best number. That's really important to being profitable in this game called life. Yeah, I guess if you're on Twitter, please hit the follow button, the real_G Warner. You can find me there, Instagram. But I guess it's time for the ultimate best bet portion of the show. So let's do it. So I'm the real_G Warner. This is betting the pitch number 205, and I'm giving you a ultimate best bet for the UEFA Nations League. So first matchup is Wednesday, and we have Netherlands hosting Croatia. I'm going to go under 2.25 in that one. And then on Thursday, we have Italy and Spain on a neutral site in the Netherlands as well. Italy currently a quarter goal underdog, also under 2.25. I like both of those. But for my ultimate best bet on this episode, I'm going to go with Italy plus 1/4 goal. And neutral site to Spain. I think they're a better side, honestly. I think they're more motivated after missing the World Cup. I think they're much more settled defensively, even with all of their, Inter players that were in the Champions League playing a ton just 4 days ago. This Thursday match, they have an extra day to rest. I think it's important. I don't think Spain has any business being a favorite with a new manager. A lot of problems in defense at goalkeeper and no real way to score goals. So take Italy plus 1/4 for my best bet. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for hanging around. 205 episodes. Who knew we'd get here? But appreciate the support. Please hit the follow button, subscribe, share with your friends, do whatever you want. Listen to while you're sleeping, whatever you're doing. Get people onto this. I appreciate the love. The respect has been incredible. Like, you guys have been so nice to me all year. Like, no one's really talked any shit in the comments, which has been really nice. I'll read those too if you want me to, but I really appreciate all the support, like I said. And I'll come back on for a weekend's episode to really go over the international calendar this weekend. But let's win some money in the midweek and see where we're going down the stretch, because soccer never ends.